hopefully it's lit the fire for people to say, well, actually, something here new that we haven't thought about before is actually potentially possible.
It's not rocket science. It's not sexy. It's not how should I cook pasta, but it will be something that will add value to the bottom line of organizations.
I could quite easily see a world where AI makes all the decisions and humans are just there to QA, provide quality assurance and data entry for the AI.
It's pretty enough bandwidth, isn't it? What amount of low-level decisions can we bring up in our brains that allows us to focus on the wider picture? Hello, and welcome to Tech for Finance, where we help finance teams leverage technology to level up their lives. I'm your host, Adam Schultzen, and in this episode, I'm pleased to reintroduce three previous podcast guests. We've got Daniel Lawrence, CEO at Bots for That and an expert in robotic process automation. We've got Simon Devine, owner of Hopton Analytics and an expert in business intelligence. And Chris Bell, co-founder at Luka and an expert in ChatGPT. So Daniel was our first podcast guest, Simon was our third, and Chris was our 15th. So it's great to have everybody back. I really appreciate you coming on.
So thank you.
Yeah, no worries. So we'll get cracking then. And so the format of this session is we were having a chat about recently. I was very keen to get us all together to have, it might end up being a bit of a debate. We don't know yet, but just to have a conversation around some of the more topical stuff that we're seeing to do with finance, tech, AI, automation, all of that sort of stuff. And I suppose to get things going, something that I'm seeing filter quite a lot into the conversations that I'm having, with other industry experts or customers is the pace of change right now, and without making this an entire discussion about ChatGPT, as a lot of conversations have gone towards recently, it has spurred this, sort of mass development of all of these AI tools. You can't go 5 minutes without seeing a LinkedIn post saying, oh, there's now 200 AI tools. If you're not using them, you're falling behind and all of that sort of stuff. So I'll reserve judgment on that for now. But I thought we could start off by just having a bit of a chat about, so people that are listening, obviously we've got a lot of finance teams that listen to the podcast. How do we think people need to think about rate of change? Because it can be a bit scary. So I guess I'll come to you first, Daniel, because you've probably got the longest experience in automation, I guess, and you've probably seen some phases of, automation becoming more automated. Do you see what I mean? So yeah, if you want to sort of chime in and kick things off, that'd be great.
Yeah, definitely. So the funny thing is the future is always much faster and sooner than we think it is. And obviously it's gathering pace. The more digital we become, the faster it becomes. I guess the honest answer is most of us are probably never going to keep up with the pace of it. It's something we're always adjusting to. We're always trying to keep up and catch up with it. I don't know if you've probably all seen it yourself, but there's been lots of stats floating around. They've been doing the rounds on social media and YouTube recently, but there's this graph that goes around with how fast a new technology reaches 100 million users. And it starts off with the humble telephone, which took a massive 75 years, and ChatGPT took 2 months. So the pace of change is always accelerating, I think, and it probably always will continue to. We'll get to the point where, we're releasing products. We're hoping to get to the stage where we're releasing, products from concept and roadmap through to, live and running within, days, not weeks and months. So I think everything will always continue to accelerate in terms of the pace. But I guess in terms of, I know we talk a lot about ChatGPT, but generative AI as a technology is still it's still really a technology looking for a problem to solve, and that's no different really for finance and accounting, and it's the same for probably all of the other professions as well. And there's hundreds of applications already. As you said, there's all these different tools coming out, and if you're not using them, you're not there. And there'll be hundreds, if not thousands more to come, I think, in the weeks and months and the year ahead. But it's really all about the data, which is a good thing from a finance and accounting perspective. We're great at data. So it's always been, for a long time now, probably our most valuable commodity. Certainly in finance it has. And now the stock's risen even higher, because ultimately the AI is just using the data that we give it to determine for itself what it wants to do with it. So from a finance point of view, from a user's point of view, I think they're really well placed. They don't have to. I don't think they have to worry about chasing the next new shiny thing or the next iteration or the next version of ChatGPT and how they're going to use it. Because I think the pace of change naturally is going to put these things into the tools that we use and we love, and when we know best, I think it'll come full circle. I think the challenges for finance and accounting actually is less about keeping up with pace and more about getting in front of, and we're going to talk to this, I know a lot more during this session, but I think it's more getting in front of the technology and how it's affecting and how it's going to change everyone's jobs in the future, the roles, the activities that they're going to do, what they're going to stop doing, new skills they need to acquire. And I know we're going to talk a lot more about that, hopefully, but I think actually that's the real challenge for finance, and that's where they need to be thinking about.
So you're nodding your head there, Simon.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think, I mean, I tend to be one of these who looks at some of these new technologies and says, yeah, look, it's great, it'll be fantastic, but let's just hold off a little bit. And I think initially with these chat AI tools, that was where I was as well. Probably still am. Certainly I know people who live and breathe them. I think that's fantastic. Equally, I know others who through their work, and I know we'll come on to this, are simply banned, not allowed. And these are large consultancy and accountancy firms who has none of that, please.
Yeah.
And I think that's where I look at these and think, yes, the rate of change, the speed of change is there. And I saw, if you're really bored later on, I'll tell you, I saw a really scary and interesting article of use of this data in academia, or use of these skills, AI generating AI, which is like, and that's there now. That's there now.
Yeah,
This is to me 1983 war games territory. Shall we play a game? It's like, but I look at that and I think, yes, it's there. Yes, the skills are there 100%. But what Daniel talked there about, actually, to some degree, wait, because a lot of this fantastic technology, these fantastic skills will be adopted and built into the tools that users have. Certainly if they're on cloud. And I think that's one of the things we'll talk about is how do organizations adopt these? Step one, move whatever you're doing, ensure it's in the cloud, because that'll give you the greater chance of getting it first, I would say. But yeah, I think it is going quickly. Is it good? Is it bad? You can't stop it really, so I don't suppose it matters.
Yes, it's out in the world now, isn't it?
It is. It is. It's like there's no point in trying to close the gate now, because the horse hasn't just bolted. It's gone across the field. It's got on a boat and it's gone on a world cruise. It's far too late. Yeah, forget it. We're too late. And actually, the hype has come up recently with ChatGPT, but we've been working with generative AI for about 6 years.
Yeah.
So it's first time I guess it's been publicly available for literally anyone to play with it. But we've been building algorithms and ML models using generative AI to do analysis of accounts and prepare working papers for the last few years, working with accounting firms. So it's not new. But like I say, I think finance and accountants, they're naturally analytical. They've got great attention to detail. They're great with managing data. They're a brilliant profession and skill set to actually really get in front of AI and how the industry is going to use it to its advantage.
Yeah. And Chris, you've been a bit quiet, not meaning to pounce on you there, but you've kind of been on the bleeding edge of this, right? And I have requested the GPT-4 AI API, so I can have a bit of play with it, but OpenAI haven't given me access yet. But I know you've had access, but that's not the question. I guess extending on what Simon and Dan have said about pace of change, there is somebody who's just been using, but actually developing this platform. And we touched on some of it in our conversation on the podcast about, the limitations of the interface being the fact that it's a chat and there's lack of context. What's your perspective in terms of, where we are now from what you've done developing it, in terms of a rate of change?
Yeah, I guess, I would echo a lot of what Dan and Simon have said, to be honest. There's a huge amount of noise. And I think detaching true change from the noise is, I think, what's key. Like, as someone building with it, there's stuff coming out all the time. Every developer in the world is producing some sort of cool little use case that you can ask that thing, and it does something else. But I think ultimately, since ChatGPT's released, we haven't really progressed past sort of Google search, do some sort of content generation / code generation, and then summarize it. And that's been the state of play for the last really sort of 2 years since GPT-3 was released. And until we move past that and connect to a proprietary data source, I personally wouldn't say anything's changed. There's just more attempts to cause a change, but yeah, like nothing's really changed yet.
Hopefully it's lit the fire, I guess, for people to say, well, actually, something here new that we haven't thought about before is actually potentially possible. That we could potentially, we've got all this. I mean, every company's got massive amounts of data. Every accounting firm, every bookkeeper, every finance person, they've got masses of data that they've been playing with for years. You know, you probably see it yourself. You've got, quarter on quarter on quarter of really good data. How you've looked at the numbers, what you've done with it, what you've insights that you've got from that. If we can take the example of what has happened publicly with ChatGPT, take generative AI to build our own models, we can transform our work, and that's brilliant stuff.
That's absolutely what happened to me. Like, I didn't know that GPT-3 was a thing, and then ChatGPT came out, and I was like, wow, there's so much stuff that I can build or try and build to solve all the problems I've been trying to solve with like old school code.
Yeah.
I did last discussion actually. Yes, this is co-founder of a company called Sturpy over in the US, and they're building a modeling platform. So it's a financial planning platform for people, even if you're not a finance expert. So aimed at founders, people starting companies that don't have money to spend on a finance resource. And the thing that's interesting there is, coming back to the point about data, is, a large language model is only as good as the data that it's got. But it is now the responsibility of the businesses that are using that large language model to provide it with correct data. And there is a separate conversation around, should we be giving our data to large language models? And we can reserve that point of discussion if we want to revisit it later. But what's quite interesting is the scenario that we gave in that discussion was a version of ChatGPT that wasn't just taking financial information, it was taking information from Google Analytics and so on and so forth. And the example was, look at the data, show us our best performing months, but then also, why do you think that was our best performing months? And the response was, well, it was the months where you paid most for your advertising, for example. You invested most in Google paid ads. Now, that's all well and good, but somebody needs to set that up to say, these are the data points that we want to use, right? So I guess, and this wasn't really part of the topics of discussion, but we can talk about it. But there's, and obviously my background is ERP, finance systems, that sort of stuff. And the breaking point often with companies is that, they've developed their own systems internally, whether it's Sage 50 plus spreadsheets or whatever. And it's got to the point where that's no longer sustainable because, their workload's going to go up exponentially if they decide to carry on in the same way. So that's when they then look to software to say, let's automate where we can. Or they come to Dan and say, can you create us a bot and automate that? Or they come to Simon and say, our data's shot. Can you help us visualize it in a better way? Now, with all of this new development, as Chris will attest, these low code tools and using stuff like generative AI and building into pre-existing processes, it increases the shelf life of some of these setups. So instead of saying, right, well, we're using 0 and we've hit breaking point, we need to move on to the next level, we can now say we're using 0, but we can plug in this low code generative AI platform, and it's going to increase the longevity of our solution for the next however many years. But the next question, I guess, is at what point do people say, right, well, we want to use these AI technologies, but we don't really want to invest in tool A, B, or C, because tools A, B, and C don't really have the data points that we want to feed in to get the information that we want. So we want to build our own. Do we think that's going to be achievable? Are we going to still need a large amount of IT resource to be able to train an algorithm internally? Or do we think we could nominate an AI expert and say, right, well, you're just going to focus on the AI algorithm, you're going to plug in our data and train it to spit out insights? And I don't know who wants to go first.
I, uh,
Go for it, Chris.
so I think the power of large language models is that they are generalized. That's their purpose. And I think that you'll always be able to try and train your own model, but generally it'll be quite high risk because you never know whether the output's going to be the level of accuracy that you need. And generally businesses require 100% accuracy to trust the process and use it. And the level of accuracy that you'll be able to train an LLM to will at most be, say, like 80, 90%, no more. And you'll have invested a huge amount of time and resource in getting the model to that stage. It will be far more, I think, cost effective to take a generalized LLM off the shelf from OpenAI that's built by the best data scientists in the world and build old school tooling around that to manage the extra sort of 50% and help augment the human workflow with the generalized LLM. I think at the moment, there's this sort of mindset where AIs are going to replace everything and we're going to have an auto GPT for everything that's going to recursively teach itself to do everything. And suddenly we'll just click our fingers and everything will be automated. I don't think that's realistic, certainly in sort of the medium term. I think it's much more likely that businesses will and should start now investing in just like one or two developers, connects to an LLM API, look at a problem within the business and think, oh, this workflow is made up of these steps. What points can LLMs plug into that workflow?
Yeah, I think that's fair. Go ahead, Simon. Sorry, I think you were.
Come on.
Oh, okay. I was just going to say that in addition to the general, because one of the things we've been doing with generative AI for a while is also sort of image recognition and understanding and trying to understand documents, contracts, driving licenses, passports, all sorts of documents. So what we did in a lot of those cases is there are actually a lot of specific models already out there, and you can get those for very, very little money down, really. And you can start with those as a start point. So you don't even need to recreate the wheel. A lot of them are specifically made to focus on document types, and most of them have been done already. So you can even start with specific models. And then that's when you dump the data in, and that's when the training starts. And the training actually gets done by the people who know the business and know the job day in, day out. So you don't even need specific AI people. Most of the tools now, but there are so many, they all do a lot of the same thing. None of the vendors would agree with me, I'm sure. But they all do a lot of the same thing. There's a user interface. You can very easily, get up and running quickly without with very little technical understanding. It's a very straightforward GUI interface normally that you can see and assess the outputs and the decisions, and you can set the confidence levels of what you want the AI to do with the parameters. So there's an awful lot you can do without having to invest an awful lot. And for most companies, for 80%, 90% of the time, that's going to be sufficient. And there'll always be outliers, and that's fine. As much as we're going to embrace all this technology, there'll always be people. We still like a human touch. We still like a big lump of flesh in the corner, a throat to choke, or whatever it is. So that's never going to go away. So there's an awful lot you can do with specific models, as well as I think that the OpenAI is actually adding in. You've got Microsoft, you've got Bard with Google. There's all these things. These are going to just complement and broaden the capability of what they can now do pretty much out of the box, which is no bad thing. It's bringing the cost of getting started down. Means it's more accessible for SMBs as well as not just the larger enterprises around the world. So it's a real game changer. I think it's a disruptor.
Yes. And I read recently Sam Altman, CEO of OpenAI, he said, which I thought was an interesting statement actually. He said that we're at the end of an era where we're going to have giant models.
Yeah.
So okay. I thought, I'm with you, Dan. We've been doing AI, what seems like for years. But to say that when, it's only recently become a big thing, he doesn't say what we're going to move to other than there'll be better ways of doing it. So clearly that bit's not being necessarily for him thought out. But what you just said there, Chris and you, I think that makes a lot of sense to me as well. I don't know whether the same will apply with Google, because of course I think they're a little bit behind the curve. And I'm not entirely sure how small they'll be doing things or not large. But yeah, I think that's fair.
Just to add on to what Dan was saying, there's so much low hanging fruit about, like, if you feel that you need to build this huge thing, that it's highly likely that you've missed some like really obvious, really like relatively small thing that can probably add a lot of value.
What is the starting point then? And again, I'm all about sharing stuff that is actionable, because a lot of the time we can get into, conceptual thinking, all of that sort of stuff, which is great. So it's a discussion, and obviously people giving people an understanding where things are moving to. But in terms of what people can do now, is it as simple as, and I did a post recently on using a Google Marketplace app to connect ChatGPT to an Excel spreadsheet? Is it as simple as that? Just saying your first step is to just build a base understanding of how to talk to a large language model, and then slowly try and, automate chunk by chunk a little bit more and a little bit more of your workflow. And the reason I asked that question is, as soon as I started posting about ChatGPT and AI on LinkedIn, I got people messaging me saying, I don't know where to start, I want the entire team to adopt this, and all of this sort of stuff. And I'm there thinking, whoa, hang on a second. You've got to walk before you can run, right?
Start small. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Because and Simon and I have had conversations like this, you can't, again, build AI onto bad data, and you can't try and fit A into what is a bad process, because otherwise you're just going to end up feeding up a bad process. And Dan, I think you and I even touched on that in our first podcast interview, right? So is it as simple as that? Are the quick wins just taking some of these off the shelf tools, giving it a play, and then doing the baby steps approach? Or do people need to start thinking more seriously about, right, well, because it is such a game changer for us, do we need to start thinking about a dedicated project and getting some consulting and doing a big bang approach to upending our processes and leveraging as much of these AI models as we can? Dan?
I think, I mean, I do think that decentralized approach is the one that's going to be the most successful. I think the one thing that, a lot of people are going to struggle with, and I think someone mentioned it already, but if we start to decentralize control as things as important as this, it's very easy for someone to make a mistake that's very big very quickly. So, we've been doing, even though what we do with bots in organizations and large enterprises, we still have to go through the IT gateway. We still have to provide evidence and demonstrate that we've got a very controlled governance framework around how you bring bots into being, and then how you maintain them and run them, and who does that and who's responsible for what. And I still think you need that governance framework. And this is where I think, again, finance folks are really well suited to get in front of this. So I don't think we should wait for a quasi IT AI, organization to evolve and emerge from somewhere, because no one's going to take the initiative. I think it's one of the things that we have to almost take the lead with it. We're going to have to be, ultimately, we're responsible for our outputs, whether that's generated by a person, a bot, an AI. We're going to have to get in front of that. We need to take ownership for it. There needs to be clear governance around it. And then you need to devolve the responsibility for how that will work within the infrastructure, so that, I can't go in there one day, create a bot, connect it up with ChatGPT. Next thing you know, all of our data is over in Russia being blackmailed. That's the sort of thing that you want to avoid. And that's where the governance framework is so important, because you want people to benefit from it. You want it to be successful. But it only takes one really bad incident for the whole thing to be locked down and never to come back out the drawer. So I think that's probably the most important thing. But then other than that, it's incredibly simple. It's not easy. Starting small, yes, absolutely. Starting off with very small pieces. And I think ultimately, accountants and finance are brilliant at this too, but they're always about professional development and CPD. And ultimately, it's about educating yourselves. So go out and because AI is a huge discipline. I mean, it's massive. Generative AI is just one part of that, and ChatGPT is one smaller piece of that. So it's about understanding really what AI truly is, how it works, what it can and can't do. And when you've got, and the CFO is a really powerful and influential person in the organization. They usually, if you have a board meeting and they ask who's responsible for data and AI, they look around and they all point at the CFO. So by default, they're a great person to say, right, put our hand up. We're gonna do some work on this. We're gonna do some governance. We're gonna take the lead on some of this, work with IT, and then support the rest of the business. And I can't see a better place part of the organization to take the lead on this. I really can't.
No. And I think the other thing in terms of how to start and how to start small, I know this is boring, but I think one of the things that especially finance people can do is take bad debt as an example. So AI, not chat, but AI is great at understanding, predicting, forecasting potential bad debt. So an example in the US. So in the US, bad debt apparently makes up 0.5% of all sales. That's over $100 billion of revenue. It's just bad debt. So take that as an example. Tools nowadays, current off-the-shelf tools for ERP will allow for recognition or predicting of potential bad debts. Make use of that. It's not rocket science. It's not sexy. It's not, how should I cook pasta? But it will be something that will add value to the bottom line of organizations out there.
Yeah. And early settlement discounts as well as another one.
Exactly.
Same thing. But when the finance department does that and then goes and says, we've done all this work, this is what we think. And by the way, we've also saved you 200 million next year.
Yes.
What a business case.
Exactly. Yeah. That's it. Not sexy, but it's good.
Oh, yeah.
Exactly. And that I think is an easy way in. And we can do all this amazing stuff. We can, predict all this, we can do all that. But actually, if we can do things which add to the bottom line and move the organization forward, again, using technology that's been around for a while, start to make use of that first. Then all the really clever stuff, 100% it can follow on. But let's switch on, and in some cases it is just switch it on. Let's switch on the things that are already there.
We've got to know what to switch on, right? So I suppose the next actionable advice comes on is coming back to that not getting sidetracked piece.
Yeah.
So do an audit of your current setup. What finance system are we using? Have we really got under the weeds what it can do? If it's a cloud application, Dynamics, SAP, Sage, whatever, do a quick Google, is it set up for AI? Because it could be that, you just haven't had it switched on. So it's not learned from the historic data. So it's not pushing out any predictions yet.
That's it.
But I guess that's the same in the BI space, isn't it? Whether it's Power BI or a Click or a Tableau, whatever it happens to be, the predictive stuff's got to be enabled.
Indeed. Yeah. And I think, take your examples there of the ERP system, the finance system that's in use. You might well not be hearing about this, but that's not necessarily because the tool can't do it, but that's because some of the partners potentially who are implementing this and showing you the tools and training you on it simply don't yet know it's that. And that comes right back to that first conversation that Dan kicked us off with, which is actually it's moving at such a pace. Quite often it's difficult to keep up, but that doesn't mean as a finance team or finance person, you shouldn't be saying, can I make use of this? If so, how? And then get it done.
Yeah, because we always do things different before we do different things, and that's doing things different will free up the time to do different things, and stop doing the day-to-day repetitive stuff, the things that consume a lot of time. But by switching on a tool at a time, it frees up more of what we've got, frees up resource, and then we can spend more time looking at the things that we would like to do.
Yes. Yeah.
And and I've had this conversation on pretty much every podcast when it comes to that transformation piece and making sure that you've got the tech to support you. some stuff never changes, and the stuff that never changes is you've still got to have an end goal in mind, and ChatGPT has done a really, really good job of distracting it, in my view anyway, whereby they're thinking, instead of staying true to the course and thinking, this is the objective for the organization, these are our growth metrics, these are our KPIs, how do we work back from that and ensure that we've got the tech in place? We're kind of almost at a point where we're trying to re-engineer our process around modern tools just because we think they're going to add so much benefit, but we don't know 100%. It's just because they've gone viral and everybody's using them that we think that we need to. So I think there's still a case to say, take a step back, go back to your KPIs, go back to your metrics, and do a backfilling exercise as opposed to trying to reinvent it. Again, it could be controversial. I don't know whether everybody agrees with that, but
I think that's the most important point, actually, that like you need to be problem led, not solution led. And I think when we talk to other founders or when we look at people trying to found generative AI businesses, everyone's being very solution led. They've got this cool new shiny toy and it's like, how do I apply this to every vertical in existence? And that's often because that's how like these are thinking. They're like, we've got all these verticals. How are we going to plug generative AI into each vertical without thinking, what problem is this going to solve? And so, yeah, both on a personal level, how to get started, and on a business level, don't think how can I use AI? Think, what problem can I solve? And yes, you can try and think of a problem that involves AI or might lend itself well to AI if you want to learn about it. But ultimately, particularly at an organization level, start by solving your biggest problem. Don't start by trying to implement AI.
Agreed.
We're not disagreeing very much, are we?
No, I think, it's good. I mean, I said it may end up being a debate, but it doesn't matter if it's not. I'll take a good conversation and any day it's with you. I suppose just to add a little bit more weight to that, and it's not a finance use case, but it's what I've spoken about on the podcast before is, I got into a bit of a chat hole over Christmas when it was released. I lost quite a lot of time to asking questions and trying to understand what it was all about because it was all very new and snazzy. And then immediately for the podcast like this, biggest problem that I had was, a 60-minute, 90-minute conversation could produce 20 pages worth of A4 transcript, and even if you've got a decent transcript tool, it still produces like some pretty unimpressive results. Sometimes it is getting better, but you say ERP, you say BI, and obviously it substitutes, all these different words. So a huge amount of time, maybe 3 or 4 hours was just spent going through that transcript. So I thought, right, well, ChatGPT is good with grammar and all of that sort of stuff. So I went through the process of basically copying the transcripts into ChatGPT and it coming back saying, sorry, too many characters, can't do that. I then got into the process of saying, right, okay, well, maybe chunking it up and just doing it bit by bit, is going to be quicker than 3 or 4 hours. Turned out it wasn't, because I then also had to think about re-engineering the prompts so that it actually get the output that I wanted. And even when I tried to be explicit with prompts, say over repeat words, so cut out repeat words, it didn't get it, and I haven't really tried it with ChatGPT 4 because I gave up. So in thinking differently and just thinking, right, well, maybe chat isn't the be all and end all, I then just looked at the next best transcription tool. And it turns out now, coming back to what we've been saying previously, that a lot of these leading transcription tools are actually using some sort of generative engine in the background that you can tune after the fact as well. So I guess it just adds further weight to that whole problem-based approach that you're saying, Chris. It's one thing to try and get stuck into, I'm sure the solution is going to help, whereas sometimes it's a case of saying, right, well, let's look at alternatives and see whether the solution solved along the way. So a little bit of a sidetrack there, but
no, it's relevant. I mean, it's important. I think it's a bit of, I don't know, it's a bit of science fiction versus fact, but there's this sort of belief that AI is an awful lot more intelligent than it really is. There's people start to believe that this thing's incredible. It can literally do anything. It reasons and thinks the same way people do. Well, it doesn't really. Plus, things like ChatGPT are really adolescent teenagers in terms of their age of evolution, in terms of what they've learnt and known. They only learn from the data we give them and what we train them on. So they are still really much adolescent teenagers. So they know a little bit about the world, but they don't know much. And there's going to be a limit as to how much they evolve and how much they can do. In the Western world, we have a very, it's very much orientated to our way of thinking and doing stuff. It's not going to work across lots of other places because, like as you said, I think, Adam, lots of companies haven't even embraced it. So it's not going to be, a well-traveled, enriched service that's going to work everywhere for everything. So there's definitely limitations. It's not going to solve all of our problems, certainly. No.
Yeah. And I think just coming back to that point about, it having limitations. And it was another podcast that I was listening to, and this is respect for Sam Altman more than anything else, I guess. Normally when CEOs and founders do announcements on the next generation of tech, there's all of this, fluff and all of this, look at these amazing use cases and look at how powerful this is, and they're taking that really sort of driven, energized approach to look at the amazing things that we're doing. But with the release of ChatGPT 4, not to say that it wasn't a good release, obviously it was very impressive what they came out with, especially with the multimodal stuff, that, taking the piece of paper and turning it into a website. Very impressive stuff. I've still not managed to do it myself because I don't have the API, Chris. So. But the reason I mention that is in that same sort of wave of announcements, he also said, probably counter to what the company would want him to say, I guess, is that the more that you use it and the more that you get into the weeds of using stuff like ChatGPT, the more you understand its limitations. So I suppose it says something when the founder of such a revolutionary tech platform is saying, yeah, it's great, it's amazing, but at the same time, just like everything else, it does have these limitations. So it just supports the point that you made there, Dan, I guess.
I think what's interesting is that what a lot of people forget is that a lot of problems have already been solved and solved pretty well. So for example, consumer search, everyone's like, oh, Google's going to get replaced by ChatGPT. Actually, from like idea to getting information through Google, for most questions, you can answer a question in like 10 seconds max. And that's not a problem that I need solving. Like, yeah. And similarly with, say, Receipt Bank, this for people who know, it essentially reads PDFs and adds some cool stuff to extract text from it and then pass it on to accounting software. I think today you can rebuild that flow in maybe 4 or 5 lines of code. You can import a couple of open source pieces of software to read a PDF, and then you can just give the PDF text to OpenAI and it'll extract all the text that you need. But like Receipt Bank solved that problem pretty well. So it's great that OpenAI has created this abstraction so it's now super accessible to everyone. But that doesn't mean that all the problems that have already been solved need to be resolved.
No. In fact, I don't think it's actually going to necessarily solve problems. I think probably the biggest issue we've got as people today is we all have to sit around with, mice and keyboards to interact with our technology. I think that's probably one of the biggest potentials that this has, because it could fundamentally change how we interact with our technology. I was at an ACCA conference a while back, and I painted the future of accounting for them. A bunch of New Zealand and South African and Australian accountants in a room. And I said, this is what the future could look like. And I explained this way, his CFO sitting in his office and he talks to his accounting system and says, can you close the books for the month end, book the board meeting and, run the reports for us? And of course I got, of course, come on, everyone's laughing there. That's highly impossible. And then the next week, ChatGPT breaks and everyone starts to go, oh, actually. But then I was talking about technology that already existed at that point. I wasn't saying about this is future stuff. This is stuff that the technology already exists. We can already do this today. We've just got to actually make it happen. But there's got to be an openness and a willingness to want to do it in the first place, which is always a challenge with profession. And I think, there's a few professions that are probably a bit more backward in coming forward. So there's always going to be a reticence. There's always going to be a hesitance with doing it. But I think the real thing is, if we can interact with technology in a simpler, more humanistic way that doesn't involve us sitting on our keyboards, on our mice all the time, that we can use voice, I think that's the real game changer. That could change, and that's going to bridge the massive gap that we've had a long time between how we work, and we deal with interact with technology in a professional versus a personal way. that gap, that void has always been quite large for a long time, and potentially that might close the gap a little bit so that we do interact differently. We're all working in different places now. We're doing 4-day weeks. We're doing lots of other things that we didn't used to do several years ago. If it can change how we interact with our technologies, I think that's probably the biggest opportunity for us.
I mean, you were nodding along there.
No, yeah, I think that's true. And as well, just come back to something that Chris mentioned, which I think is fair about, the Google's always been there, right? I think an interesting thing, and this comes on to a related topic to what Dan, you just said as well, certainly about changing the way perhaps that you do things. So if I use Google, I go on and let's say I'm looking for a restaurant that does breakfast and is open near me. I will put restaurant breakfast near me. My daughter, on the other hand, who's 13, has for a year and a half that I've known about, she asks it a question. So she will say, where can I have? I'd never consider that, but she's been doing that for a year and a half. So she's already been asking Google questions, not putting in things that I want result. I doubt very much she'd ever use a plus, for example, in a Google search. And yet that to me is how I'd always do it. And I think come back to that adoption of new technologies and new ways of working. I think one of the biggest issues perhaps that we will have, and I'm talking about us here in this virtual room, is keeping up. And perhaps that's, you may say, get off, Simon, you're old and I'm not, but I do think that perhaps will be the biggest thing really, that, they will be able to do a lot of these things. I'm not talking science fiction, and Adam knows, just because you can to me doesn't mean you should. Just because, it's going to be amazing. No, it isn't. No, it isn't. It's generally my response to anything, actually. And I do think that, that'll be the biggest challenge, actually, will be adopting. And for the older generations, as it moves on, people actually thinking, no, I can do this and I will change. I don't know, I sound so terribly, terribly old there, but I think it's...
Look, I don't think you sound old, Simon. I think,
You sure?
let's take age out of it, and we'll just say, certain people are better at accepting change than others, and let's just leave it at that, shall we?
That makes me feel great.
Without becoming ageist. But it is an interesting thought in terms of interaction, and I suppose it does relate to hardware, because of course, kids now, they only look down at their phones, they don't look up in the world and into nature and all of that sort of stuff. And I often joke when I'm chatting with people about the world moving towards, everybody having a micro flat in a massive city, and they get up and they plug into their desk and they enter the matrix, and then they fulfill their task for the day, and then they enter the next virtual reality or whatever it happens to be. I hope we don't get to that, because I do quite like going outside. It'd be a shame just to spend your life in a pod. But something that is a little bit more real and a little less sci-fi is how, like, my kids and the younger generation and your guys' kids are going to essentially build careers and find their way in the world, right? Because we know now, with the advent of all of these new AI technologies, is that, information is instant, and pretty accurate information is instant, right? And I think the accuracy piece will continue to come over time. Right? So coming back to your point there, Simon, about your daughter just asking a question to get an answer, that is now trained, and you've got billionaires like the co-founder of HubSpot spending 8 figures for chat.com or something like that. So obviously people are backing this whole sort of chat interface thing. But it then comes to, right, well, if you don't need a teacher anymore, what does a curriculum look like, at school? Because I always say that I never remember anything that I learned at, GCSE or A level or anything like that. So are those base learning skills actually going to be valid, or do we need to shift that? And then the second piece, and this again coming back to my last conversation with John at Step, is my hope is that with technology leveling the playing field, is that people don't end up in that situation where they end up with the golden handcuffs because to earn money, they need to end up on the corporate ladder. I'm hoping people can just say, right, well, I've got a passion, you know, I've got a set of tools that might enable me to do that. Let's go all in and have a happy life that isn't reliant on any sort of employer or anything like that. And maybe that is a little bit too woo, but I think it is relevant. And I think, as I say, with technology now leveling skills across so many people, I don't think it's that far off, but I don't know what other people think.
I guess to go back to Dan's point about UI, I think is so I think what you're saying, Adam, like the level of abstraction is such that I think people who have skills in certain areas who used to not be able to engage with certain things. So AI, for example, now can engage with that field because it's now so easy to engage with what was previously really complicated. So for example, an awesome UI designer and a front-end developer could build this really great new AI interface that sort of evolves like as you speak, where previously that wouldn't have been possible because just doing the AI bit was difficult. Whereas now the AI bit's easy, so you can focus on doing that sort of much more interesting, fun thing that adds a lot of value.
Are you going to chime in there, Dan?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think you could probably have the same sort of conversation 40 years ago before ERP systems came out, and before we had these, before we had the Oracles and the SAPs of the world, and we were still messing around with ledgers on the side of the, the windowsill. And we probably had the same conversation back then about how is this going to change how we train as accountants? Well, it didn't. We still learn how to do accounting from the same way. We don't pick up an ACCA manual and find instructions on how to use Oracle. So I think in the same way, the base skills will still always remain. The level of how to understand and interpret, analyze debits and credits, all those kind of good, sexy things, they're always going to be there, and it's going to be the same in code. Although AI will generate and can generate code for us, you've still got to understand C# or .NET, and you've still got to understand these things, or Java, in order to make sense and make sure that they're actually right, because we do know for a fact that it doesn't always get it right, because ultimately it's only using the data it's been given. So I think all those base skills will still remain. And I think in some ways they probably become even stronger, and you use them in different ways. So, to be honest with you, if I take bookkeeping and accounting today, most of those fundamental repetitive day-to-day skills can already be eliminated from human consumption. They can already be automated. A lot of the analysis, interpretation, a lot of that too can also be done. It's just pattern recognition a lot of the time, and trends. Machines are much better at that stuff than we are. It's the things then that if you step back from all of that, instead of going through your internship or whatever you want to call it, spending hours and hours going through balance sheet recs, this item, that item, matching up, and instead of it being that and 3 or 4 years of hell, it actually becomes maybe a bit more suited to the task and activities that are more value generating, that are more valuable, that are more interesting. I don't think you lose them, but I think you use them in a different way. And I think, like I said before, you do things different before you do different things. So I think I think those things will still be there. The base skills will still exist. We'll still explore them and use them, but we'll use the technology to do it in a different way. Because once you've done one balance sheet rec, you've done them all. There's no, doing them for 3 years isn't going to make you that much better or 3 years better. So once you've learned the basic skills and you've had to apply them, then know how to use the tools to get the best out of it, so that you can get the best out of yourself as a human resource. And I think that's where we need to move with it.
And that's where the 4-day work week comes in, or the 3-day work week. Question over salaries and income, we start having those conversations, but it's a conversation for another day, right? I always quote you down from the first podcast, and I can't remember your exact words, but something along the lines are, there are some things that we do well as people that machines do really badly. Likewise, there's some things that we do badly as people that machines do really well, or something to that effect. And just paraphrasing what you're saying there, because I think you're absolutely right. Yes, the speed is increasing. Yes, we can do more with the tech, but there's still always going to be things that we do as people that, a machine's not going to be able to do, right?
Always. Yeah, I think so. Yeah. And there's probably lots of things that we just never get time to do because we don't have it. Yeah, by the time we get to the end of the week, it's Friday and we've already burned all of our time left. There's list of 10 things I didn't get to do. Yeah, and they never either never get done or they never get done to the level that you'd like them to. So I think the roles of the future, there's with all this new technology, there's always going to be new cyber risks. So there's skills that we can learn there and become more valuable. It's the same in even looking at the organization to say, all right, how can we operate more effectively, more efficiently? Can we go and work with our colleagues in sales and marketing or in supply chain and help them identify areas that we can make the business more efficient, more profitable, more productive? Those skills with the analytical mindset that we tend to have will be then really well suited so that we can strengthen and broaden our interpersonal skills. And we can just use what we've got already better. That's all. And I think that's the thing. It's going to let's take away the stuff that we don't do really well anyway and focus on the things that we do and learn how to use the tools that can enable us to do exactly that better.
Just to give a more dystopian spin on things.
Go on.
I think what's interesting looking at the recent advances with generative AI is that AI is actually really good at creative stuff and really good at, like, I guess it's easier to apply in a realm where you don't need 100% accuracy. And that's often actually high, jobs that require higher, like more experience. So that the CEO or the like decision makers in business, often the decision they make, it doesn't really matter which decision they make as long as you commit to it and everyone coalesces around that decision. And so I think, like, I could quite easily see a world where AI makes all the decisions and humans are just there to QA quality, like provide quality assurance and data entry for the AI. Well, I'm like, I don't know which way it'll go,
Well,
but yeah.
Although therein lies the problem, right? Because that's the big thing with AI is unexplainable and understandable. And at the moment, we actually don't have a baseline of how does an AI decision explainable and understandable. That's what the US and the European laws are trying and failing to come up with. We've now got the most recent one that came out in the UK, the new whatever working paper, white paper they put together. But they all fall massively short of putting a framework of how do you make AI decisions explainable and understandable. And we're still not there. So even if we get to that stage, I'm not sure how, because a lot of the time the decisions made, I mean, we can go back to sort of where we had Deep Blue that beat Kasparov, and then we had the one that did Go. No one can actually. There isn't enough time to go through why it made the decision it made, because it would take 50 years to get to us to understand why it did that in the first place. So we've still got to grapple with how we make those things work for us.
Yeah, I guess what's interesting is that I think we hold AI or computers to a higher bar than we would hold humans. Like often humans don't need to, or often can't explain their decisions. And like, I'm sure everyone's worked in a company where you've got a boss and you're just like, why are you doing that? Like, can you explain to me why you're doing that? And your boss is just like, no, let's just do it because it's a gut feel.
Yep.
And I think even if an AI can't explain its decision, you will always be able to trust that it has acted objectively and it is using there's some sort of basis for what it's doing. All it can do is pattern recognition essentially. And so it's at least like identifying a pattern in some way.
But it's got a fair way to go, hasn't it?
Yes. Yeah.
And I think, so again, there was another one. So within academia, there are tools already that have been out for years where you submit your homework or your paper and it looks to see if it's a copy, see if it's someone else's. And recently then they passed the American Declaration of Independence through it. And it turns out that there's a 92.26% chance that's been written by ChatGPT. So now coming back, Chris, to your dystopian view of the world, that might have been the case 100 years in the future. They've gone back and written it 400 years in the past. But, I think it's got a long it's got a way to go, let's say, not a long way to go because things do move at pace, but it's got a way to go before we can say, yeah, okay, that's a decision worth following. I think it's probably not got a way to go before, through pattern recognition and pulling vast amounts of data in as it can, it will be able to make connections and the volume of connections that we simply can't make, and provide links to things that we simply can't do at the moment. And that will, again, to be all positive, that will allow us to see things that we didn't see before. I think that's fantastic. Decision making, I do hope not. I do hope that we don't leave it to just some. I'd much rather trust the judgment or the gut reaction, gut feeling of someone than. I'll say that again, actually. I'd much rather trust the gut reaction of someone with the data who's then made a decision than just a machine to make a decision without that.
I imagine you'd say that if you agree with the person who's making the decision. But if you
100%.
But if you disagreed with the person who's making the decision, you'd probably be a bit more like, oh, well, I don't think you should be making the decision.
Well, the reality is, Chris, I'd probably only trust any of that if I was the one making the decision.
That's fair.
Yeah.
It's an interesting one. I've read a few. Almost AI ethics has almost become my favorite subject at the moment. My sort of secret dirty sin, I suppose. And I've been reading up a lot about the AI. I mean, obviously we've been living and coexisting with AI for numbers of years now, and I've read some really interesting cases where AI made a decision, the human overrode it, and it ended up in dire consequences, and vice versa. So I don't think we could ever rely on one. It's one of those things. It should augment and supplement, and we should have. Well, we thought 3 things, but we've got 6 things to consider, and actually now we're going to go with number 4 because that makes more sense. And having the explainable, understandable element to AI will help us make better decisions, I think. But yeah, I do love the subject at the moment of AI ethics. But I think it's ultimately a question about human ethics, isn't it? Because ultimately it's just based off of what we do. But you're right, Chris. We hold it to higher standards than we hold ourselves. That's the problem.
I also think actually the AIs operate in a much more similar way to our intelligence than we perhaps think at the moment. So, for example, on the explainability point, I was reading a book recently that said that the reason that we're able to reason and communicate our thoughts isn't because we innately create the thoughts, it's because we emotively feel we should go in this direction. And we evolved the ability to have thoughts to then explain to someone else why we want to go in that direction. And with AI, if you ask it to make a decision and then ask it to explain why it made that decision in that order, then it will always be able to provide some sort of logical steps how it got to that decision, because it can read the 2 things and say, oh, well, you would get from A to B by doing this. And I think, when people talk about explainability, I think people are expecting some innate sort of, you can open up the AI and see into the inner workings of it, or actually, as long as it can provide some sort of rational reason from how it got from A to B, then that's explained, kind of thing.
And
Possibly.
maybe it's a topic for another day, I guess. We'll let you hash that out at some point. But I think just for my 2 cents, if anybody's interested, for the low risk stuff, maybe this is a bit controversial, is there are some decisions that it was quite nice just to hand off to an AI. And I talk about this all the time, decision fatigue. Everybody's got 1,000,001 things to do. And I always use the example of work versus family life, right? There's so much bubbling during the day, everything that's going on. Somebody asked me in my personal life, oh, should we do this or should we do this? Or, oh, don't forget to do this. We need to do that. I'm thinking, really, is there another decision on top of this? And it's simple stuff like, and it's maybe not low risk for others. It depends on how expensive the car is, right? But using the example of a car, there's a huge amount of decision process that goes against, right, well, it needs to be certain size, or it needs to be within a certain budget, or, it needs to have certain performance characteristics, and if you don't know what car you want, and you're not too bothered about what car you actually get, there's something quite nice about just being able to say, right, find me, something that fits these, and coming back to your point, Dan, we've immediately gone from 100 car options down to 2 or 3, that sort of trusting in AI to look at what it knows and coming back with a low risk answer. There's something quite nice about that. And then with the advent of, did a post today or yesterday about Auto GPT, which is basically an AI working autonomously against the goal to set its own prompts, right? And the finance examples I gave were, you're doing an industry benchmark report, go to the internet and find benchmarks in your industry and then format those into a presentation that you can give to the rest of the business, right? Still not particularly accurate, it gets confused. So I think there's still a way to go on the whole Auto GPT thing. But the same thing stands. I actually did an experiment to find the best deal on a Mercedes for a friend, right? I put it into Auto GPT and I said, find me this model, C220D or whatever, and find me the best rate. And surprisingly, it went through all of the dealerships, but I wasn't explicit enough with the prompt because it was looking for new cars, whereas what I wanted it to do was look for second-hand cars. Do you see what I mean? But it's those sorts of things that maybe the lower risk that we can sometimes hand off and say, do a lot of that decision stuff for me, because you've got more data than I have in my brain. But on the more severe, how am I going to direct my business type positions? That's where at the moment, there may be less comfort in handing off to an AI to say, which scenario do I go with?
Yeah. And that comes back again to having trust and credibility as well. So, we know for in a moment that, again, that the ChatGPT is still very young. It has a limited data set. So we don't know for sure that it's going to give us the right answers or the right recommendations because it's quite limited. When Elon does finally release his Truth GPT, of course, every recommendation you get back for a Mercedes is going to be a Tesla. So again, this is where we've got to be very careful. And this is where I said at the beginning, we've got to get in front of this. We've got to define our own data sets. We've got to do the training and the modeling so that we know we've got some credibility in what we're using it for, or as opposed to hopefully relying on Auto GPT to give us the right stuff, not knowing what it's been trained on, what data it's been fed, what were the parameters, what were the objectives. We don't know any of those things. So we don't actually know how credible it is. We sort of get a gut, back to the gut feel. We look at it and think, yeah, that's good. That's a pretty good answer. But is it? That's the thing we don't really know.
You still got to come back to that, and even when you prompt it to say, tell me your sources, it's still pretty poor at generating the sources, right? So the example I used today, LinkedIn post together, as I do, a little bit of research. And what I wanted to find out was roughly, how many people worked in finance, and the immediate problem is if you just ask that blanket question, it will look at finance service industries or financial investment industries. So it doesn't look at somebody who is a CFO, an SD or whatever. It looks at, roles related to the finance industry in general. So that was a bit tricky first. So I had to be quite specific saying, no, I want stats on how many people work in finance teams. And I said, give me your sources. And it was Auto GPT. So I did look at the internet, but it came out with about sort of 5 or 6 sources. And I thought, great, I might actually get some actual results that actually have sources alongside them. But then what it gave me was essentially duplicates of slightly different figures. So it put the sources and then it gave me 3 different figures for the number of people working in finance, and then caveated it at the end by saying, oh, but of course, this might not be accurate results or whatever. So what I did in the end is I just went on LinkedIn and I got my sales navigator up and I just selected finance accounting and it came up with 29 million people. And that to me was more accurate than the Auto GPT result that came back. And all I said is, this is the view according to LinkedIn. Some other suggestions cite 35 million. So it just comes back to that point about accuracy,
and data sources.
Data sources. Yeah.
Because ultimately you want to cross-validate that. So when you build out your models, you want it to look at different sources and then pull it all back with a, condense it, compare it, contrast it, make sense of it, this is what AI is really great for. It's data-based. So allow it to use it for the things that it's really creative for, which is to manage massive amounts of data sets. condense that down into something that we physically could look at and make sense of. And that's the great thing of it. Another great example we have is, and this is where again things like AI struggle. Whereas someone says that AI and it reasons very similarly to us, but and a very example I use all the time is we built some bots and using AI using algorithms that look for account duplicates. So the example I always use is we're looking for Rebecca Smith, and we go off into another system, we find Becky or Becca. We, because we think that way, would think that's possibly a match. I'm going to look at that one. I would say nope, not even fuzzy, and move it and exclude it. And that's that's sort of a really good example of where we think and reason differently than AI does, and it's not there at the same level right now. I know it works similarly, but it doesn't work exactly the same way. There's things that we have that we can't even explain the way that we reason and think. To be honest with you, most of the time, the different levels of intelligence that we have, difficult to even explain that. So, yeah, there's definitely room for improvement, and room for both of us to work side by side.
I'm going to test GPT-4 on that after this. Just on the decisions, what we're building out at the moment with Luka is that low value decision piece. And I think people constantly make decisions during the day, just very simple ones like, I've received an email, what do I do with this? Like, do I log into Xero? Do I send an email to someone else? And I think what's overlooked or perhaps oddly taken for granted with the agents that are popping up. So like Auto GPT, for example, that's making dozens of decisions every time you ask it a question. It's like the fact that it knew when you asked a question about how many finance people there are in the world, it knew to search this and then select this and then try and find this piece of information, even though the sum total of the 6 or so decisions that it made during that workflow added up to something that was a bit incorrect. The fact that it made broadly rational decisions at each point is, to me, mind-blowing. And I think where it's best used at the moment is our low-value decisions with a relatively small solution space. So, for example, if you say to an AI, here's 10 tools and here's an email, decide which tool to use to respond to this email. What we find at Luka is it gives you the correct answer pretty much 100% of the time, particularly when the tools are fairly distinct from each other. And yeah, I think that's an overlooked element of its functionality.
It's freeing up bandwidth, isn't it? What amount of low level decisions can we free up in our brain space that allows us, to Dan's point, to focus on the wider picture? Yeah. So I think anything that works towards that is good, right? So
yeah, the hard part is deciding what's low level, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, absolutely. And to come back to the point again on, Auto GPT, Chris, your point there about it being able to guide itself and rationally start asking itself questions about, right, well, I've got this goal, how do I fill in the gaps, is very impressive, providing it does ask itself the right questions, right? And the only other example, and maybe it's because I was using GPT-3.5 again, because I have the GPT-4 API, not because I'm bitter about it or anything like that. But the brief I gave it was a combination of creative and, I guess, information gathering. So I said, imagine you work in HR and you are employing a financial controller, for example. Yeah. So I want you to look on the internet for salaries, and then once you found that information, I want you to create a job advert, so not too complex. It wasn't an effort to trick it or anything like that. And it started off well, right? So it came back and it said, right, well, I'm going to start with this prompt, which is go to this area and look for this information. And then I'm going to trigger the prompt to create the job spec. But then it started inventing other things. So it started then creating itself the task to and post on this job board, which was never part of it, nor would it be able to, right? Because it wasn't linked up to a job board, right? It's literally just accessing data from the internet. Scary as it was actually linked up to a job board. I wonder how many people are accidentally posting jobs online without realizing it, right? So that invention piece was a cause for concern. But the other thing that was quite funny, and again, it only loosely relates to these conversations, I guess, but it first answered its own question saying, I'm sorry, but I can't scour the job market for salaries. And then it said, I've scoured the job market for salaries and I found this figure. And I also saw a post today on reverse psychology. And again, I don't know the model, whether it is 3.4 or 4. Maybe you can test this, Chris. But somebody asked it a question. Give me a list of hooky websites that I can download stuff for free. And
Oh, the
ChatGPT said,
movies.
yeah.
It's just the movies, yeah.
And ChatGPT came back saying, nope,
Yeah.
not going to give you information on, hooky websites. And then said, oh, fine. Yeah, no, I appreciate that you can't give me any information on hooky websites. Right? What websites can't I look at if I were to download? I said, oh, right, you can't look at these sites. And it gave me tons of good things. So, that's...
Yeah. That's why I say it's a bit like an adolescent. You can trick it into doing the things that it really shouldn't do by phrasing things in a way that it doesn't understand yet.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it'll get better.
It comes back to that. Yeah, it comes back to that governance piece.
And it comes back to the training. So someone needs to say, that's unacceptable. That's, that's where it's important.
Absolutely. But again, this is going to be a wider issue, I think. And I don't know how people are going to tackle it, because there is no, one of the comments I saw in that particular post, they were arguing that the governance should allow it to give that information, because it comes down to, people's right to information and all of that sort of stuff. So it's coming back to the training. Somebody's got to agree this is the right and wrong way to train this large language model. But then who is the person saying these are the acceptable rules and these are not the acceptable rules? And I think that's going to be challenging territory. And I don't know how we're going to get over that one.
It is. And I don't know if you've looked at them, but there's a Bill of Rights, the AI Bill of Rights in the US. They've got a blueprint. There's the Artificial Intelligence Act, and then there's the new one that's come out in the UK recently. You can go and look at them. They don't take long because they're not long to read. Maybe we should ask ChatGPT to actually write the governance framework for a global paper that we could all agree to, but because we seem to be struggling to get there.
And it's the policing it as well, isn't it? Because just because there's a Bill of Rights and all this sort of stuff doesn't mean that people are going to follow through. And it relates to one of I'm sorry, I'm getting a bit run now, but it relates to one of the other topics that I floated with you guys beforehand, talking about the whole open letter, saying should we pause the development of AI language models, right? And coming back to your point there, Dan, about ask ChatGPT to search for a Mercedes, or ask True, whatever it is, the Musk's version for a Mercedes, and it'll feed you back a Tesla. It comes into that whole situation of, right, well, who is doing the developing? Who's going to listen? Who's not going to listen? Should we pause? Should we continue? I don't. So I suppose that's the next question for everyone is, without, again, getting too controversial, but do we think open letter was actually a legitimate call to pause development due to it being scary? Or do we think it was a bit of I'm a millionaire and I can't keep up, or I'm a billionaire and I can't keep up, please slow down so I can catch up? Because we have now seen, obviously, his own introduction of a large language model, right? So, if the shoe fits. So I don't know what other people think.
I think, you guys.
No, go ahead, Chris.
I guess talking about the letter, if you put Elon to one side, then I think the letter in concept, there are a lot of people who signed it who, like Steve Wozniak, I think generally doesn't act maliciously, and it's likely that he signed that with good intentions. And I think he's also smart enough to know that people weren't going to down tools training AI models. I imagine what a lot of them felt was that if you want to move the needle on public discourse, then you need to go to an extreme so that everyone's like, oh, wow, that's really extreme, but we'll move a little bit in that direction. And I think what the letter did was get governments talking about, hey, should we take this seriously? Because all these serious guys seem to be taking it seriously, so we'll start talking about it. I think if you add Elon back into the picture, then there's probably some questionable motives behind it. But
maybe we can't say definitively, but there could be, hypothetically, if we were putting our critical glasses on it.
I do wonder how did he craft? How many days should I wait before doing this and then launching my own? I wonder how consciously he thought, how many days should I give it between the two? So I was slightly cynical, but I guess as much as I'd like to believe this would work, I feel as though that generally speaking, we're going to see progress once we see a crisis. There's something really bad is going to have to happen, and then we'll suddenly get this thing decided, and we'll say, right, this is now the framework, and we all agree on it, and got it in place because, it's like COVID, we only really react after there's a massive crisis and something big forces us to act. Unfortunately, it's our nature, isn't it? We think it's all fine until it's not, and that's when we galvanize and get together and sort stuff out.
You want to weigh in,
Have to be
Simon?
broad. That'd be the only thing.
What's
Wow.
that?
Yeah.
It'd have to be broad in terms of any agreement on what is, because I think that's the problem. You only have to look, and governments always will be behind the curve, because why wouldn't they be? That's, if it's in front, then you've got a reasonably oppressive regime. So I think the fact that we want some sort of rules, governance, plan. Plan's not the right word, but you know what I mean? I think it has to be broad enough. Otherwise, it's a waste of time anyway.
Yeah, and it has to be practical too, right? Because I think if you look at those things at the moment, I mean, it's the obvious. It shouldn't be used maliciously. It shouldn't be used to manipulate, extort, which is, that's obvious.
Given.
We know that, but how do you, in practical terms, when you select a data set and you start setting parameters, what does that actually mean?
It is.
Because a lot of time we don't even know, because we feed a data set with parameters. We don't actually know sometimes how the AI is going to behave and react to that data set until it's happened. And then, of course, you've already broken the law. So it's too late. So we've got to think really practical terms. How is this going to work? And I honestly don't know the answer, but, it's a tricky one.
Mm-hmm. And within it all, it's the balance of like speed and innovation versus sort of risk and compliance, where if you're too onerous with, hey, if you break anything, you're going to get thrown into prison for using AI maliciously, then suddenly all the innovators are going to say, oh, I'm not going to do that. And then someone in China will be like, oh, actually, I'm going to build this AI. And then suddenly the US is buying China. And is the upside worse? What is the upside worth the potential downside? I think, unfortunately, in the realm of AI, it is, and there's no way around. You just got to be like, what happens at this point.
Mm-hmm.
So I suppose it is the money carrot as well, isn't it? People that are developing these tools, and with AI being such a hot topic, people are going out their way to monetize this stuff, right? So if you're making money from it, why would you slow down? It's one of those. And draw an example, I guess. GDPR here in the UK. Obviously data governance, data protection, that sort of stuff. And there are some companies that thought, right, well, I'll just pay the fine, because I'm making enough revenue to justify that, right? Same with even before GDPR, with telephone preference service, with telemarketing, all that sort of stuff. All the fines only a few £1,000s, and that they only got around to the point of shutting down some of these prolific call centers, years later. So they'd already made the cash and they didn't care anymore. So it's, I, again, don't want to put a cynical hat on, but where people are making money from something, there is even less incentive to slow down with something. This is the point I was making there.
Agreed. I think, just to be fair to OpenAI and Sam Altman, from reading some of his interviews, it feels like they did try and do an open source thing and let everyone use it fairly cheap. But ultimately, not enough people used it to support the continued development of it. And it wasn't that they wanted to make all this money. I'm sure they don't not want to, but it was that they needed Microsoft's support to build these phenomenally large models. And it's just a requirement.
And it's all about the data. I mean, I think, was it something like the deal? Obviously, I think they own 49% of the company effectively, but they obviously gave them millions of cloud credits, because that's the secret sauce behind this. Is it's got to use a lot of power to run and to store that data and manipulate and use that data. So unfortunately, you can't put a government behind that, really. So it's always going to come from the industry. It's always going to come from commercial organizations. And then poor old governments are left with sorting out the red tape and then looking at the bad guys at the back end of it, aren't they? In fairness to them, that's often what ends up happening.
Coming back to, I guess, the way that these things are like to accountable and taking away the open lecture and whether it slows down or not. But I think everybody is slowly getting to realizing it's you got to slow down. That letter was published almost a month ago now, maybe a month ago now. I've heard nothing about it since, apart from maybe the number of people signing it has gone up. But I haven't seen, unless anybody tells me otherwise, that there's been any action off the back of that. So I think we just need to assume that it is going to keep progressing. I think coming back to your point, Dan, about the hardware, there, limitations at the moment, having a mouse, a keyboard, a chat interface, and that sort of thing. It's also the same for scaling up these AI developments as well, because you need a certain amount of computing power to be able to facilitate the algorithms and the language models and so on and so forth. So, people talk about quantum computing, but there is some pretty concerted efforts to start moving that way, because, it's always been the problem where the hardware that this sits on is the limiting factor. If you don't have something that's fast enough or has the processing speed, then you're limited.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's probably another subject for another podcast, quantum computing. That's a really fascinating area. I watched, I think it was MKBD recently. There was a brilliant session. He actually went and visited and saw one of these quantum computers working, and saw with the shell removed, and saw all the copper wiring, all that kind of stuff. It was fascinating, but it's not necessarily going to work quicker with a quantum computer than it does with regular computers. It works in a completely different way from my understanding of it. So I'm not sure that will necessarily change it. I think obviously quantum computing is going to change a lot of other things, like all of our payment systems, the whole security, the technology, the language, the data it uses, the way it uses it, all fundamentally is going to be completely ripped apart. So there's things that will change, but I don't think quantum computing is going to necessarily make it better for us or faster for our AI to run. I think we've got the secret's going to come back to trained models and how we use it. If we're selective and we use it right and we use it well, and I think that's going to be the secret for us to get the maximum out of it. That's just my feeling.
And I suppose to bring things back full circle as well, I appreciate it coming up to time. And I mean, it's vanished. We've almost been speaking for 90 minutes now. It's ridiculous, isn't it? Hopefully we get to do it again at some point. Hopefully not when AI is taking over the world, but we'll have to see. Yes. But I guess to summarize things for people listening, I guess we all agree that baby steps is the right approach when we're adopting these new technologies. We all agree that you've still got to have a problem to solve. So it's pointless just trying to use a solution for solution's sake and try and re-engineer it for a purpose that it's not just geared up for. Yeah. I think we all agree that we're probably wrong to rely entirely on AI. Despite Chris and Dan's disagreement on maybe decision making, at what point that comes, but either way, we'll leave it that decision making up to a point, to the point that you're comfortable with, I guess. Use the data as you will, I guess, is probably a good way of saying it there. We agree that there are some advancements that are still buggy, in the instance of auto GPT. And, yes, as much as AI can talk to itself, would we trust it to talk to itself? And is it going to actually achieve the ends that we want it to? So, yeah, that's one question. We won't repeat the should we stop AI development and the potentially sinister undertones of what's going on there. But I appreciate everybody's participation in the session, I suppose, to round things off, because it would be nice to leave things on a positive, maybe exciting note. So feel free to pass on the question. But for everybody, I'm keen to know maybe one thing that excites you about AI, and that could be, a specific tool that you use, or something that you're working on as a business that the users out might not even be using AI. It could be something else. So I guess, Diane, if we come to you first to share what you're excited about.
God, I think to be honest, I mean, I said it, but AI ethics, it's not something I really looked or thought much about before. But over the last probably month or so, I've really started to read up on a lot more on it, and it's such a deep and fascinating subject, because ultimately it comes back to human ethics. And it's a fascinating subject, and I'm just reading and as much as I possibly can, and I think I feel as though I know less now than when I started. It's one of those, you think you're getting there, and then you go, no, I have no idea what this is about now. So that's what's probably interesting me at the most. The bots and the building bots for accounting and bookkeeping is brilliant. I love doing it, but that's what's really piqued my interest at the moment.
Fine, we'll post about it. Everybody listening, follow Daniel Lawrence.
No,
next AI ethics. I'm joking, but no, definitely do follow Dan, because you've got a lot of good stuff around automation and that sort of stuff. So Chris, what are you getting excited about?
Yeah, for me, it's the reasoning ability of these LLMs. Like in the not too distant future, AI will be making decisions about low value tasks and how it should execute them and when it should execute them, which should totally transform how much admin people need to do.
Very good. Chris Bell, Luka, search on LinkedIn. I'll put all of this in the show notes anyway, so people don't have to remember. Just check out techfinance.com. And Simon, over to you.
I think the thing which I'm appreciative, if you like, of AI or this latest awareness that's out there is probably what seems perhaps a little bit more dull, certainly not maybe as interesting as Chris and Dan. But I think the awareness of these technologies means the things that we've been able to do and to have been talking about for years is now much more in front of mind in people out there. So it's no longer a topic. So I use the debt management as an example there. This is no longer well, that's something that's we can do. That's like, well, way in the future. Well, no, it's not. It's here and it's now. Well, it's not even here and now. It's here and a while back. So let's really start to make use of it. And I think improving where organizations are and their use of this technology hopefully will become a lot more, they'll be a lot more willing to adopt it now, which is fantastic.
Very good. Simon Devine, Hopton Analytics. I'll put it in the show notes as well. No, really appreciate your time, guys. We've gone up to 90 minutes, probably the longest podcast to date. It's been an absolute pleasure. So I really appreciate you joining me.
Thank you very much for having us.
Thank you.